Welcome everybody. My name is Lincoln Lavoie. I'm a principal engineer at the University of New Hampshire Interoperability Lab, leading our broadband and open source teams. And it's my great pleasure to be able to host and kind of moderate this panel today amongst all of our esteemed colleagues. One of the activities we're currently involved in at UNH is actually hosting the ORAN Alliance Plugfest. Many of the labs that are engaged there are actually represented here today. So I think that's a great kind of starter on this. As we're running through the panel, a couple of housekeeping items to think about. One, I am going to encourage the audience to ask some questions, keep these guys thinking on their feet, because that makes it a little bit more interesting. So be thinking about that as we kind of go through the start of this. As well as I want you to cast back your thoughts to some of what David was introducing at the start of the opening session about the idea of the test beds, the shared test beds, and the integration of all the open source components, and how we actually are able to make that and support that effort within that community. So without further ado, no one really wants to hear me read a bunch of bios, so I'm going to have each of the panelists here introduce themselves. And I'd like you all to start with just each answering the question of what recent open source release or achievement has you kind of the most excited, the most energized about what's going on here today. So we'll start with Florian at the end, okay, and work our way this way, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Lincoln. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. My name is Florian Kaltenberger. I'm usually an associate professor at EURECOM. So EURECOM is a research center and graduate school in the south of France and is the founder of Open Air Interface. More recently, I've been on a sabbatical at Northeastern University in Boston, and which also shows the way Open Air Interface is going towards opening up to other open source communities. So that's one of my missions there. And so to answer the question, which open source project or release I'm most excited about is obviously Open Air Interface, but more particularly, recently we added a feature to Open Air Interface, which I'm very proud of, which is the ability to talk directly to ORAN compatible radio units. So the 7.2 interface, and I think that is in the spirit of this workshop because it makes Open Interface one of the potential open source projects to actually implement the DU and the CU for Open RAN deployments. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Kobus. I am a professor in the School of Computing at the University of Utah. In this context, I'm also the director for the Powder platform. Powder is a fairly large-scale indoor, but mostly outdoor mobile and wireless testbed, part of the Power constellation of testbeds funded by NSF. So in terms of the open source I'm most excited about, I'm going to echo Florian here. With a little twist. So as a mobile and wireless research platform, we try to provide building blocks, hardware and software building blocks. So we do OAI. We also do SRS. And the thing that excites me is the same thing that excites him. And I'll say this a little bit differently. We've been trying to put together this over-the-air wireless testbed for 5 years. And the radio has just always been problematic. SDRs are great and you can do everything with them, but they don't do it very well. And so the idea that we now actually at the point where we can make use of off-the-shelf RUs and combine that with open source all the way in the back is really attractive. And in our environment, we do this over the air, so we have some of these COTS RUs deployed in our testbed. They connect to buses that go around our campus. So this is a really, really rich environment for research, for end-to-end testing. So yeah, I think this is a fantastic time to be in the space that we're in to do this kind of realistic testing in an end-to-end way.
Hi, I'm Anupa Kelkar. I'm the product manager from NVIDIA. You heard Michele reference NVIDIA Arc a few times. NVIDIA Arc stands for Aerial RAN Colab, which is our end-to-end open source or access to source with OAI Layer 2 and above, NVIDIA Arc Aerial Layer 1, to have a complete open source private 5G network as an innovation sandbox. And that's one of the things that excites me the most about being able to have a complete ORAN align, interoperable multi-vendor components, servers, RUs, all put together as a private 5G network, hosted on a accelerated high-performance compute with access to source not only for the layer 1, but also for machine learning AI frameworks to enable research for next-generation networks.
Hello, my name is Ian Wong. I work for Viavi Solutions. So Viavi, we're a test and measurement vendor focused on all things network, from wireless all the way to fiber and coax, et cetera. So I also happen to be the co-chair of the Test Integration Focus Group. Good to see you, Alex, in the ORAN Alliance. Also the tech lead for Valor. It's Viavi Automated Lab as a Service for ORAN. It's the NTIA grant that we've recently won from the US government. So glad to be here. Thanks for having us. I'm glad that there's at least more audience members than panelists, so that's good. But yeah, my favorite open source project, I mean, we're a test and measurement vendor. We work with pretty much everybody except our competitors. So I don't want to pick any winners or losers, but I would say one thing that excited me a lot, it actually motivated Viavi to actually be a new board member in OAI, right, is the fact that OSC and OAI are coming together. You know, it's almost like, those, when you're growing up in high school, you see this guy, this girl, they should be together, right? It's like you've been thinking about it in your head the whole time, and they're finally together, right? So that's kind of what I feel about OAI and OSC. It's kind of match made in heaven, and I'm very happy to see that. And we're very glad to be part of that. We're part of the OSC talk and supporting that for a long time. So we're excited for that.
Thank you. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation. My name is N.K. Shankar. Formally, it's N.K. Shankaranarayanan. People just call me Shankar. And I actually bring a diversity of perspectives. So I'll share that, and that's the way I'll answer your question as well. So I'm a research scientist at Rutgers University Wind Lab now, but it's recent. This has been only for about a year. And for a long time, I was with AT&T labs doing research and then involved in deploying solutions in AT&T's network. So I bring that perspective of what works in a network, but at the same time, was always very involved with standards activities. So it started with, actually started with WiMAX and geopolitics, but ONAP, open source, and then ORAN SE. And then I was also active in the ORAN Alliance working groups. So actually, David mentioned the decomposed or decoupled SMO architecture. So, but then some of my work was also radio systems, and so what we are doing now at Rutgers Wind Lab is all aspects of having an ORAN set up end-to-end, and there are some funded projects testing energy efficiency and things like that. So I'm going to give you like a broad answer to, it's not one thing because I'm seeing different trends. So I'll pick 3 trends and that are exciting in what's happening, and some of them have been repeated. One is the fact that I care about a system that works end-to-end. So you can do automation, you can do app development and things like that. And that would not have happened without organizations like OAI and SRSRI and having those CUDUs and or core from Open5GS or OAI. That enables a full end-to-end, the user plane working. And so that's great for university labs because it's open source. The second trend, and going up the management chain, because I was involved with the SMO, is there's a gap in what's happening in open source with an SMO being available. So I'm seeing this trend. There's more energy, where OSC is moving up into the it was non-real-time RIC, and now SMO and then the collaboration with Nefio. That's a nice trend. And the third thing is, actually this is ORANL, and I think David talked about it, the fact that there is more interest in having some common benchmarking among all the labs as to what are the known working mix and match options. And only then we'll get to a stage where we have something working, and then we can move on from there. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Bimo. I'm a PhD candidate from National Taiwan University of Science and Technology. We are co-hosting open labs for the OAC under testing and integration and testing projects. So in our campus, we try to build up an end-to-end test to do the interoperability testing for the OAC components. So the answer for the most exciting releases for the open source project is obviously from the OAC, but we also try to do the interoperability test with the OAI component. So we're also excited to see for each release the OAI component has or will release, because we want to, as an academic institution, we try to leverage or trying to what kind of added new features or new capabilities for each release that OAC and also OAI has. Okay, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hongwei Zhang. I'm a professor of computer engineering at Iowa State University. Currently, I lead one of the power platforms, the Aero Living Lab in central Iowa. So for Aero itself, we have a very sharp focus about the needs of the rural communities and rural industries. Because of that, we actually have the open source, full stack, SDR and kind of end-to-end platforms that's deployed so they can run OAI, ORAN, and also SRSRAM-based experiments in the lab. Besides that, because for rural broadband, there's actually the last mile challenge that wireless could play a role. There's also the middle mile solution that's needed. So in Aero, you can find actual end-to-end platforms from the RAN to middle, kind of to the backhaul, XHaul, down to back to the cloud center. There's also the NeoSatcom that's going to be included into Aero. Actually, as we speak today, like around this week or next week, that's going to be there. So that provide end-to-end platform for us to study the open solutions in general. So as a Living Lab, another focus we have is actually to think about how we can potentially use the testbed as a tool to build communities, to bring different sectors together. For example, we have, besides working with partners in wireless industry, but also we have a strong partnership with ag industry and so on. As part of that, we're actually organizing an annual event this August, the last week of August, that's going to be held in central Iowa, where you would find actually a lot of ag tech companies there. There's also the Farm Progress Show that's going to be held there. It's one of the leading ag industry event. For folks interested in the ag sector, we would love to see you there. And if you go to aerowireless.org, you can find out a lot of information there. So with that in mind, actually, to the question, I was actually thinking about the question, what is the latest open source release that could be interesting? Turns out I found something that's not so much about the core technology innovation, but so important for the rural broadband. There's actually a new project from I just saw, not so new yet, but a few months, right, from the Linux Foundation connectivity project that's about the ISP toolbox, right, to really empower the ISPs to use some of the tool set that's available from the open source community. So that's actually pretty cool. So that potentially I hope that can empower some of the small techos to be able to leverage the tools coming from the community here. Thank you.
Awesome. So as you can see, we've got a great panel here. Very diverse kind of set of understanding and involvement in the industry, from labs to tool vendors to component vendors. Reminder, I do want to have the audience ask some questions, but I'm going to kick us off here first with, from the laboratory and the testing standpoint and the collaboration with the open source communities here, what do you feel is the single biggest missing piece, or what are we kind of, if you could wave the magic wand and put the energy somewhere specifically, Where do you think it would go first? So does anybody want to jump on that question, or do you want me to pick? Kobus, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this was mentioned already. I would say end-to-end testing in a realistic environment. And of course, this is what we're trying to do, so I'm definitely biased here. But I think we need to move, and I'm speaking here as an academic, although we have interest from non-academic vendors in our platform that's doing the exact same thing, but getting to the point where we can get where we can get to end-to-end testing in a realistic over-the-air environment. I think if we focus on ORAN, the RAN piece has to be real, and then yeah, I think all the things that we talked about this morning in terms of end-to-end realization of that, that's where we're going to get to the interesting applications and use cases. And again, this is, just to tie it back to where we started, this is why I'm excited about these COTS RUs, right? This is in some sense, that was the missing. Yes, the SDRs got us there, but they weren't quite as great. And so now I think we can get the distance and the coverage and the better reliability. So I'm really excited in terms of where we can go from here.
I'll jump in. I very much agree with everything that was just said, but additionally would like to make one more key point, which I think is also important more from an open source community perspective, which is shaping the testing to be and that was highlighted in one of the sessions earlier, continuous integration, deployment, and continuous testing of new features and developer check-ins that get automatically tested over the air, end-to-end, with an ORAN-aligned, real performant network.
So this is not open source, but I will say this. We have a vendor that's testing with us now, and every 4 months when they do a release, they do their testing over the air, right? And I think that's where we need to get to with open source as well.
Yeah, I want to throw in another keyword here, which is scalability. So I think that's definitely also something that is missing today. I mean, we have these great labs today, and we can already do end-to-end tests, but in a small scale, with one GNOB, maybe a handful of UEs. But real networks are large, and if you want to do any of that stuff that people would like to see in 6G, AI, ML, you need to have large networks to see the benefits. You need to be able to generate a lot of data. So I think we need to find ways how to scale up these labs that we have today, and also make the code that scalable, to work to be able to work in a multi GNOB cellular environment. I think that's one thing that we're missing today as well.
So I'll chime in with two separate thoughts, both on the gap. One is, yes, we are talking about the user plane, but ORAN has a big management plane. And I'm repeating this, something I said earlier. The whole SMO, if you're talking about open source, it's not there, a fully functioning SMO. And you need that to develop all parts of it. But on the testing frame mindset, from the testing perspective, I think if we take a larger perspective of what's happening with ORAN, the whole business justification of ORAN being deployable, the whole community the whole industry as a whole is struggling with this question about ORAN being as competitive with pre-ORAN in terms of performance. So one gap in the testing mindset would be, is the testing geared to show that this performance of ORAN versus non-ORAN? That could if that goal is important to the industry, that should come into the test labs. That kind of motivation.
I guess I'll offer a bit of a different perspective. I mean, I agree on the over-the-air testing ultimately, of course, right? That's important, but I think probably not a surprise to you being a tools vendor, right? Like we think repeatable tests, right, is important, right? Like the ability to, at scale, test the performance of various network incarnations around common test methodologies, test frameworks, so that then you can do the CI/CD/CT and really understand where the industry is. So, I mean, I don't disagree fully. I mean, but I don't. Let's not forget that before it gets deployed in the field, you better darn sure it's actually tested very well in the lab, because it's very expensive to find out issues in the field to come back to the lab, right? So really our business model is built on making sure that people are fully prepared in the lab before they go to the field. So
I was going to say something snarky, but
Yeah. So from my own opinion, I think I agree with what Ian said. Adding to that, I think currently, from what experience that we have doing the integration from the audio perspective in OIC, we still lack of the consistency for the like testing configurations across multiple platforms, right? So this might waste lots of time to do specific for the integration. If we can come up with a consensus for the common profile for the testing and integration, I think we can enhance the integration itself to maybe reduce the time for integration, and then use the remaining time for maybe testing the functional, doing the functional testing itself. Yeah, thank you.
I'll probably add a piece here. So I guess when we think about testing, probably there are different notions of testing, right? One is maybe in this crowd, there's a lot about, how do we testing the ORAN implementation, based on the spec, right? But also broadly speaking, we think about some of the, especially the test bed, right? Field deployed, outdoor, over-the-air test bed. I think one of the value proposition for that is actually enable the flow of ideas into kind of more really high fidelity settings, right? With that in mind, I think if one of the things we have come across when we try to work with tech leaders like John Deere or Mir, testing those advanced wireless applications like teleoperation and so on. One challenge we face is, today the open source solutions we could have just does not give the performance that would get them excited. So in the end, we have to use, as of today, right, using some of the more cards with some programmable interface, but not open source. But that can give them the level of performance that cannot get anywhere, so they can do the next phase of their experiments. If there's a way to bridge the gap between that, I think that'd be actually open up many doors, especially for folks in like the graduate students who have brand new ideas, try to push it into the real world experiments.
So okay. The way to improve the quality of open source is to contribute. Yes, that's very important.
Questions from the audience? Yeah.
Thank you. Can you help me, please? Is there something special about Open Run in terms of the academic input compared to any other types of projects? That's one question. Second question, is this going to impact 5G, or is this more work that will more likely impact 6G because of the timing of Open Run and 5G deployments were already being done?
so since I carried it, I shouldn't stand it. I think in terms of academic input, I would answer it as such. I think up to this point, really, academics have not been able to really contribute into this environment. Right? If you weren't working for Nokia or Ericsson, there's no viable stack. There's nothing you can do, really. So that's number one. So, and that's not Open RAN. That's just the viable open source stack. I think the thing that Open RAN brings that makes it really even more interesting is that you have both east-west and north-south open interfaces. So it's the whole ecosystem becomes open, so you can conceptually interpose yourself in a protocol flow, right? And so that's the thing that, from an Open RAN perspective, makes me excited, because that means I don't have to go to standards bodies to do something, to try something out. I can both from an open source perspective and an open architect or open interfaces perspective can do that. And I think that's, in terms of, yes, academics, broader too, that's, I think, the exciting thing about Open RAN.
So I'd like to comment on the second question, the 5G, 6G question, because I've been asking myself the same or similar question, actually. So O-RAN came after the initial 5G specifications and added elements to the 3GPP network that allows you to do more advanced stuff like machine learning and artificial intelligence. At the same time, machine learning, artificial intelligence, people say will be one of the cornerstones of 6G. So actually, I've been asking myself also the same question: how is O-RAN and 3GPP going to work together on 6G? Yeah, because 3GPP now has also started to do their own work on AI and machine learning, and so far have not really seen how these two things will come together. Will O-RAN also be an add-on to 6G, or is there already, I don't know, maybe I'm not aware of things, is there already some sort of collaboration on 6G between O-RAN and 3GPP? So I don't have an answer to the question, I just have more questions, really.
Just to chime in, I concur with Kobus that it's not about Open RAN, it is about availability of open source. So if you dial back 10, maybe 15 years back when we were at AT&T and graduate students would come from universities, they'll say, what did you study? Oh, I studied wireless networking, wireless systems. What work did you do? I did everything with Wi-Fi. That's the only thing that was available. What do you know about cellular? Oh, very little. I don't have access to cellular systems. So now that has changed. Now students will come and say, I have this implementation. And your second question, I think some of the principles of disaggregation and cloudified systems, I guess the way the trends are, many parts of this will continue into 6G. How it will change 5G, I don't think it's an open source question, it's an industry question.
Yeah, if I could chime in on being a co-chair of the test group in O-RAN Alliance, and actually our chairman is actually sitting. I want to make sure I don't say anything wrong. But O-RAN, of course, I think is impacting 5G, right? I would say there's already early deployments. Dish is an example, of course, Rakuten Mobile. We have trial networks from Deutsche Telekom, and you name it, right? I think the idea, it's an operator-led organization, so there's a strong motivation. Obviously, there's already deployed networks out there, but there are some who are just investing or some are refreshing their networks. I think O-RAN will play a big role, and obviously the open front haul is the most mature interface, and a lot of operators are really excited about that because it democratizes the accessibility to radio units, et cetera. And then, of course, all the intelligence aspects on top of that will definitely come now and in 6G. So I would say, O-RAN is not just for 6G, it's definitely for 5G as well. Yeah.
So I'm gonna interject a question here since Ian is co-chair of the TIFG there. We've talked a bunch. Yeah, you don't get to put the mic down yet. We've talked a bunch about the test plans and performance testing versus scalability testing and stuff like that. And I think one of the things that brings value to the industry is when you have the ability that everybody kind of agrees to what the test is, right? That helps it convey meaning. So what can we do, either as the open source community, the O-RAN Alliance community, the academic communities, all of these communities together, to bring the test cases, that definition of those testing, to that next step to help kind of deliver on that need?
Yeah, I know Lincoln will definitely bring up this question. He's very active in the TIFG, and so are actually several folks here. Actually, David had a very good example in his talk, right? Like, as you all know, specifications bodies, O-RAN, 3GPP, work on consensus. Consensus means it's slow, right? That means there will be conflicting. There's always, consensus means all you need is one person sustainably objecting, then things will not get done, right? So it's the reverse in the open source community. It's right. It's really up to the individual. Of course, there's some gates and checks, make sure you don't screw things up, but then there's a lot more speed and impetus for action, right? So that will be my challenge back to the open source community is hey, while we're waiting for TIFG and the consensus process to come out on how to do performance testing at scale, repeatable, et cetera, why don't we try it out, prototype in the OSC, create those use cases, create frameworks wherein we can report results consistently. And I think as you do that, more OTICs will come. And then if TIFG will inevitably say, hey, look, it's already there. Why don't we adopt it? Very similar to what happened to the A1 interface, right, 4 years ago. So I think that's kind of, I would say, really the biggest contribution here from the open source community is let's come together and start building it. And then you can influence specs. Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Other questions from the audience? Beth?
Hi. So I think the big elephant in the room with ORAN, and I think any of the big elephant in the room, whoops, with any of these open source things is how much of the vendor's going to buy into it, because of course there's a push-pull, right? Because if it's proprietary, the vendor has the advantage. So just want to have you sort of talk about how can ORAN get past that very significant barrier.
I'm not going to directly answer that question, but I'm going to state something that is important to note, and it goes to the role of open source. And even if open source doesn't get fully adopted as a commercial product, open source has its value in what's happening in university testbeds. If you don't have open source, you can't train a pipeline of students because the tools are available. And so, and the examples he just gave about that, you could have a test case and run and see the examples. So even if open source is not fully it may probably never be optimized as performant as a commercially optimized system.
I disagree on that.
Pardon?
I think open source can be optimized.
And then it should be run. It depends on the whole community coming together to make that happen. There's no technical reason why it cannot. It's the dynamics of the funding and things like that. So I just wanted to make that point that in a lot of the excitement you see is because it enables you to do something and do research and show demonstrations. And then, but your question is still very valid. How it ends up in commercial equipment is, I'm not the person to comment on that.
I think Kobus was going to jump on somebody.
Yeah, I'm before you. So I'm not sure it's the right question to ask, because I think that the big vendors, they will always do their own stuff. Yeah? They or maybe not always, but for the next few years they will continue what they're doing. But what open source enables is other players to enter the market, and there are examples now already. There are startups and small companies who are using open air interface and other open source tools to build products and to sell those products. I mean, they don't sell those to nationwide operators, but they sell those for private 5G networks on a campus or for even for specialized use cases that the big operators don't manage to do today. So I don't think open source is going to take over everything, but they will coexist and both have their benefits and drawbacks.
I want to add, I was going to say the same, but I'll add something small, which is, I mean, not all open source is equal, right? If we look back, when Windows and Linux were competitors, people probably said the same, right? And now there's no data center that doesn't run Linux, right? So will we get there? I don't know. We're clearly not there, and clearly I would say the mobile stacks it's developed greatly, it's much more stable. It's not there yet, right? I mean, it's not at the Linux or the OpenShift or OpenStack stability level, but can it get there? I think it might, so.
Maybe one approach, if I may add, is that actually, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so to your question, I think there are many things we could do, right? One of the action items we could work on is actually deploy the best systems available in field with applications in the loop, right? Actually have end users participate in the process. That's probably one way of driving progress, and also get the user base built over time, actually.
Anupa?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is democratized access just by opening up the source code, not having black boxes, open interfaces. It's really helped researchers today make, when they are developing a protocol, you have access to the source code. You can test the results of your algorithm right away and have validated benchmarks instead of just a white paper. And I think that's a huge step forward. I also think that, as as was described earlier, when you're teaching about wireless systems, in the past there wasn't maybe good ways to highlight or elaborate certain aspects of wireless technology. By opening up source code, it gives you an opportunity to make sure that students, who will be the future workforce, just about globally, will be able to learn right from the get-go radio networks, radio access networks. Now, does not mean that open source is not necessarily viable from a commercial deployment perspective. Certainly carrier-grade SLAs, stability, scale, all of those factors do need to be built in, but it is open source. So you have the opportunity to shape it to be a commercially viable network.
All right. And I think we are right about at time for this panel. 40 minutes goes by quick, I know.
Closing words.
So this has been excellent from my perspective. I'm going to give everybody, 30, 40 seconds or so if you want to go down the line and add any final thoughts. And we'll start with Hongwei.
Okay, so I will go back to the points I shared earlier. It's a call for help. Actually, as we work with the end user communities, I really love to see, get advice on how we can work with the community to build high-performant open source solutions that we can even engage end users in our first day. Thank you.
Yeah, so from the OSC perspective, I think, like my colleague said, a happy consequence of the open source itself is to accelerate the commercial product. So one of the things is there. And the second is, from our perspective as an academic institution, we want to build the end-to-end testing platform that we all know that to build the end-to-end, it's really expensive because not just assuming that we use open source, but also part of it maybe consists of the commercial, which is unreachable for the individual or small-scale businesses. So to be like inviting more contributor to accelerate the development of the open source, we try to give access or service to the independent developers such that they can use our common platform to test the, let's say, their solution, their own solution or their own application, such that they don't need to pay attention for the integration and also deployment for the platform, but just focusing on the functionality of their solution. Thank you.
So my closing observation would be, I think there is an inflection point, there's a trend, there's some things happening, and like David also mentioned this, so this is a Linux Foundation event. And so when I was talking to friends, they said, oh, Linux Foundation, oh, the guys who did Linux. And so is something like that happening for wireless networks? And like Kobus said, not there yet. The open source or wireless is not at the robustness scale of things like Linux. But this is the first OSC session at a Linux Foundation networking summit, right? This is the first time it's happening.
You're missing the yet word.
Pardon?
Yet.
You're missing the yet word.
Which?
It's not there yet.
Oh, not there yet. Oh, yes, that's right, not there yet.
Yeah. First of all, kudos to the organizers for keeping panelists standing, because then we can't wait to get off the stage as well. So I'll be brief. Basically, call to action to the Linux Foundation members, open source community, hearing ORAN, OSC for the first time, please contribute. And if you need test tools, call me. Okay.
Yeah, I actually, just to close, I'd like to say that I think this is one of the best times to be a wireless researcher developer. We're just about starting to develop algorithms for the next generation networks, open source, ORAN aligned blueprints, test labs, OTA performant, scalable are all important. As we look at next generation networks, the ability to replace traditional, conventional algorithms with machine learning, either AI infused, AI driven, to get to 6G AI native, I think you just can't shape that without democratizing access, open source, and ORAN specifications. So handing off to Florian for his remarks.
Yes, so yeah, I'd also like to echo basically what was said before with a call to action. I mean, this is an open source workshop, and we have many open source projects around the table. And the way to shape the future and to bring those open source projects where we want them to be is to contribute. So I'd like to invite all of you to go and contribute. I know sometimes it's a painful process, but I think it's a necessary process, just like to get a paper published. I think we should all go and contribute more to open source.
I don't really have anything intelligent to add, so what they said, it's a very exciting time to be in mobile and wireless, I think. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and a round of applause.